because I started with, like I said, like this weird calculator that was coding in assembly or whatever. And also on my computer, I was, following some books and learning how to code C DOS programs.
Yeah.
And like a C DOS program is like 200 lines. And, if you just show up with no experience and you open up Unity or Unreal or something like that, it's like, welcome to the super complex thing that you don't know anything about yet. And here's the part where you do something and you don't really understand how your thing fits into the larger picture.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's actually kind of a worse way to learn, because it's like saying what you're supposed to do is accept a million things that you don't understand and don't know how they work, but somehow become knowledgeable enough to do this part in the middle that has to work with all these pieces out here.
Exactly.
And it's like, that's way too much information to take in at once. And it's hard, I think, to sort of grasp a foothold of like the fundamentals.
I just wanted to add, I don't know if you saw the trend I've seen online where it's like an artist clicking on Unreal or on Unity and then they get flashed and then it's like this fighter jet console, right? They get so confused. It's like, man, you just said one point that is so correct. You learned, like people of your era learned macro to micro, and we're learning micro to maybe macro, but because we're working so much on the details, like if it was a painting, we're focusing on the eyelashes and someone else takes care of the mouth. But we don't know how they interconnect, right? Like you said. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today I have Tim. You might know him, but Tim, please introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Tim. If you know me already, it's probably with the name Walaber. That's the name I use online for both me and my company. So if you see me on social media, that's the name. I am a indie game dev. I've been making games professionally for like 21 years now.
Wow.
But I've been full-time indie for about 5 or 6 now. Every time I have to tell the story, I keep saying the same number, but then time passes. And yeah, so I have I have 4 games on Steam right now, which are kind of my main 4 games I've made as an indie. And then before that, I worked at a few different places. But the main thing was I worked at Disney for quite a long time. Like the majority of my sort of professional pre-indie career was at Disney. Where all video games, you say Disney and you might think maybe, animation or TV or something like that, but all video game stuff. Originally I got hired into their QA department. I could tell you more about that if you're interested. And then I became a producer and then a designer, blah, blah, blah. The most well-known things I worked on during that time, or the most well-known thing I worked on during that time, was Where's My Water? I don't know if you remember that game.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
With the alligator and you're trying to cut the dirt and everything.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah, I was the lead designer of that game.
Wow. Okay. No, that explains a lot.
Yeah, and then so I was my time at Disney overlaps with the rise and fall of mobile almost perfectly. Like I joined before mobile was a thing, and then mobile became a thing right when I was kind of getting more opportunities within Disney to become a designer and then like a design lead and stuff like that. And we made Where's My Water was the peak of that. We had a couple games before, a couple games after kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I stuck around long enough to where mobile started to be less and less fun. And then sort of switched over to indie dev after that. So that's the short version of
awesome
background and what I am. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about coding for a second, because that's a topic that I'm currently getting into just right now. So take us through your journey in terms of how did you learn coding, or how did you get into coding to where you are right now? Yeah.
If I were to describe myself, I would probably say first I feel like I'm a game designer, and then second I'm a coder, then third is tech art, and then everything below that I'm less good at. Traditional art is probably my weakest thing. Well, music would be almost a 0 for me. So coding I do feel is a big part of my skills, and I did not. I've never had any formal training. So
that's awesome.
I was born in 1980, so I am very much the computer generation. I have an older brother and an older sister who, do like computers were not, such a foundational part of their growing up, right? But for me, basically, game consoles like line up with my early schooling is NES, and then like middle schooling is Super Nintendo, and then high school is N64, and and college is like PS2 and whatever. And along with that was like personal computers and stuff. So my dad had a need for computers. He did broadcast systems, like basically like the wiring and the setup for complex broadcast systems was like what he did. And so he had a need to do wiring diagrams, essentially, that kind of were like, okay, we have all this equipment and here's how it's all connected together and here's the floor plan, and so here's how long all the cables need to be so we can like build these complex like broadcast systems. And so I was exposed to computers pretty early on, and I got hand-me-down computers pretty regularly as a result. And simultaneously the internet was just starting right when that was all happening. So I just kind of was super interested in computers. Originally, my entry point was actually computer graphics.
Okay, I was guessing the actual PC. I was guessing Commodore, maybe.
Oh no, it was all like IBM compatible, like 386.
Okay, like, so high end, kind of.
Well, it was just that I think that we just missed the whole like Commodore 64 kind of Atari. What it 80 or whatever it was. We kind of missed that.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it was because my dad was more into, he was using computer-aided drafting software and stuff like that, and I don't know. But
sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I think the first computer we had was like a 386.
Yeah.
IBM PC compatible kind of thing. I was really interested in computer graphics and special effects and movies and stuff like that. And so we got some basic software that I could mess around with, like trying to make 3D models and things like that. Very early.
What are we talking?
So the very first one I remember that I got for myself was called Will Vinton's Animation, I think was the name of it. Have you ever heard of this software?
Never heard about that.
So Will Vinton, I think I'm remembering the name correctly, was like a famous like puppeteer stop motion artist person.
Yeah.
And so then they had started making some software where you could do sort of like virtual characters and stuff like that. And I remember at the time it being noteworthy because it used splines for everything. So all the modeling was splines. Like you didn't just make like triangles. And so it was really intended for characters and organic things and stuff like that. And I remember finding the software amazing and very confusing at the same time. But that was kind of my entry point. And then in high school, I had a friend who was also into computers and games and movie making and stuff.
Yeah.
And we just started getting interested in making our own games, kind of from two sources. One was I got a book that was just like how to code your games in C, in DOS or whatever, and I was kind of like just following along that book, learning some basics from that. And then also some software came out because Windows was out, at this point. There was this old software called Click and Play, which is now the company that made it is now the company that makes Multimedia Fusion, which is still around and still some popular games are made with it. Like Baba's You, for example, is created with it.
Oh yeah, a good game.
I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that correctly. I hope I didn't get that wrong. But yeah,
we'll fact check you. We'll fact check.
Please double check the internet and tell me where I'm completely wrong. But Multimedia Fusion is definitely a thing that's still around, and the lineage of that is a software called Click and Play, where you could make games without knowing how to code by just kind of placing objects in the scene, and then you had this sort of like spreadsheet where you would put different reactions, like if this happens, what happens? What happens if this happens? What happens? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
I sort of got into it there, and it just snowballed where I found more and more people in early internet places that were helping each other and talking about coding and like writing up tutorials and things like that, and it just kind of went from there.
Wow. wow. I mean, that's an era I feel like I really want to put more on the podcast, because I've always had like people from like who started maybe in the 2010s or 2000s, but you know,
Yeah, this
they're
would be more like the 90s, like 96, 7, something like that.
yeah, I feel like that era needs to be highlighted a bit more. Kind of reminds me of like this hobbyist mentality, this like tinkering mentality that does not exist, or is not promoted as much anymore, because I feel like that's what made a lot of people good at what they do back in the day.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I think that it's easy right now just because of the way social media works,
Yeah,
that you're more likely to encounter people who are talking about it as a business or a job or a hustle or something like that. And so you kind of get the impression that that's all there is. Like you're either all in and hardcore and posting all the time on social media or not. And certainly that was not my entry point at all. Like I was using like early forums and also like Usenet, which was like pre-web forums where they were kind of like text based, but you could find people in different categories that were interested in things and you could post messages and reply to them and stuff.
So cool.
And for example, I had a graphing calculator, which is like, kind of like a fancy calculator with a keyboard and a screen on it for math class. It was required in high school because you need to be able to graph functions and stuff.
True.
Because,
yeah,
when I was in high school, it certainly was not expected that you would bring a computer. That laptops were not even really plausible at the time. So you had to have this little calculator so you could graph functions and stuff. But it was programmable. You could write little programs in BASIC right there on the calculator.
Wow.
And so I made some stupid like text adventure games that I would have my friends play in class and stuff like that.
Cool.
And then I would go to the computer and I found there's this whole community of people who were essentially jailbreaking their calculators. They were like, oh, if you do this, you can like basically break it out and then run programs written in assembly on it. So you can run high performance applications on this thing. And we can look at this game we made. It's like, Wolfenstein type stuff, like running on your calculator. I was like, what? And all these people were just sharing the tricks and how to do it. And they're like, oh, if you order this weird cable, you can plug your computer into your calculator and then you can download this thing and you can jailbreak it and you can put all these crazy like games people are making and stuff. So I got into that scene and that was all people coding in assembly. It was like either basic or assembly. Like
I mean,
easy or
if people
hard.
don't know what assembly is, it's basically the first layer of abstraction before binary, correct? Or the second one,
basically.
Actually. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like the actual executable that you run on your computer is just a bunch of instructions, right? It's just like each byte says, oh, do this instruction, do that instruction, or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you could just like construct a file manually where you make sure the bytes are in the right order to do stuff. And then like one step above that is assembly, where you use something that's slightly closer to English,
yeah.
Where you just have like little words that represent the instructions and the data and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just a big list of like, do this, 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 this.
So
and
like,
things like branching, like an if statement. It doesn't look like an if statement if you're just scanning it, because what you do is you do a subtraction or something, and then you say jump if that subtraction resulted in 0, and then you'll jump to a different label. Otherwise, it'll keep going. So it's like the whole program is just in one big string, and sometimes the thing skips to some other spot, and you have to kind of keep track of all of it and stuff.
Yeah, but to program in assembly, like it's the performance advantage of that is crazy. Like
it's generally like a 1-to-1 correspondence between what you've written and the instructions the computer will execute. So if what you wrote is efficient, then it's incredible. A lot of people, will just generally assume if you say assembly, it's like, oh my God, that must be so incredibly difficult. That's like the crazy corner that you shouldn't have to worry about nowadays, right? And weirdly, though, I actually think it's really cool because it's actually really simple, because you only have like 15 instructions. Like you can't do that much. You're like, I can load a number, I can add a number, I can subtract a number, I can compare numbers. Like that's basically it. And so it's actually not as intimidating as it sounds. And it was an interesting entry point for me. But the point that is a little more related to kind of what we're talking about that was interesting about that time is less the assembly part and more that there was this community of people who were just excited about it.
Yeah.
And like it was like, it's this calculator, like they were just excited that they figured it out. You know what I mean? And they were enthusiastic that you could play with this technology in a way that went above and beyond what you thought you could do with it. And so tons of people were just sharing tutorials and things, and like, oh, you want to draw sprites? They're kind of tricky, but here, let me share my sprite routine. Here's this crazy thing I wrote in assembly to draw sprites. Here's how it works, and you could learn from that and stuff. And so my entry point was very communal and friendly, and in a spirit of sharing was like the whole vibe, and so I always really fondly remember that time, and I do try to keep that up, with the way I approach what I'm doing now. But it is times have changed a little bit, and I can definitely see if you were joining into getting interested in making games or learning how to program now, the entry points are maybe a little more, I don't know,
it's
commercial
less,
feeling.
like less about the entry point, more about like the aspect of that there's so much resources these days that you don't know even where to start. Like even there's a lot of advice of like, no, don't you even look at C++, like you're wasting your time, right? And that's C++, that's even an abstraction of assembly, or even an abstraction on C, if you may, right?
Yeah.
But like you have people who, like you, right, Tim, who grew up in the era of assembly, maybe, and didn't have any other option, but like the community was interested in that stuff. So yeah, it's I feel like back in the day there was way more niche and way more condensed correct information than there is right now. Although there was less information, it was condensed, it was proper, and it wasn't misinformation.
Yeah, when you found a good source, it was an incredible find, at the time. Yeah, I often think, I teach at a college, a local college. It's a design college, so all the students there are aspiring designers.
Yeah.
In my case, my students are aspiring game designers. So it's not a hyper technical focused curriculum, but I teach the prototyping class. Like, let me teach you enough coding and enough technical stuff so that you can make your own prototypes and kind of understand how to talk to technical members of your future teams you might work on with and stuff like that. Anyway, I think a lot about what it's like to start for the students now compared to me, and what my experience was like. And I actually really think that the guidance, I mean, it's even worse now because like AI is just like the next layer of all that. But like, the guidance to just start with the modern, convenient things and dive in. Why wouldn't you? That's the most refined modern stuff.
Yeah.
Is fine, but it definitely is missing something. Like, because I started with, like I said, like this weird calculator that was coding in assembly or whatever. And also on my computer, I was, following some books and learning how to code C DOS programs.
Yeah.
And like a C DOS program is like 200 lines. And it's just like at the start, you go, here's how I put my computer into graphics mode,
Wow.
and then here's a loop where I check if you press anything on the keyboard, and then I update some variables, and then I draw the screen, and then I repeat. And like the entire program is right there,
Wow.
and how it works, and the fact that the computer will just simply run through your code in order as fast as it can is clear. And, if you just show up with no experience and you open up Unity or Unreal or something like that, it's like, welcome to this super complex thing that you don't know anything about yet. And here's the part where you do something and you don't really understand how your thing fits into the larger picture.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's actually kind of a worse way to learn, because it's like saying what you're supposed to do is accept a million things that you don't understand and don't know how they work, but somehow become knowledgeable enough to do this part in the middle that has to work with all these pieces out here.
Exactly.
And it's like, that's way too much information to take in at once. And it's hard, I think, to sort of grasp a foothold of like the fundamentals. Whereas like, like a DOS program or whatever is like, the whole thing is here. Like there's no engine, there's no, and so, there's some confusing stuff in this one file. Like, why do I have to type, void main, blah, 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 or whatever. But like, the number of things you have to understand to get a grasp of the basics is much less. And I actually think that nowadays, I really recommend if people are actually want to learn coding and stuff, not just like means to an end, like I'm trying to skip to this product idea I have or whatever, but like they're actually interested in it. I actually personally think the new like fantasy consoles are really great for that. Like Pico 8, for example. Have you heard of this?
No.
So Pico 8 is amazing. And basically what it is it's a fake old 80s caliber computer. So it's like you boot up this application called Pico 8 and it takes you to a screen that seems like it's a Commodore 64 essentially, where like you have a command line, but you can also pop into an editor, and they have an editor for code, graphics, sound effects, and music all in one. And so you can draw some graphics with a nice little like low res, pixel art thing. You draw those graphics and then you toggle over to the code page and you write a really simple program like draw this sprite at these coordinates, draw this text at these coordinates. And it's like what I was just describing. The whole program is it. There's not a whole system surrounding it that you need to learn and understand. And so it kind of simulates. People make them now, I think, as kind of like a half nostalgic, half like fun project to make these kind of like simulate a constrained older computer.
Yeah.
But it also then simulates the experience I had, how I learned, which was
that is interesting.
You're in a nice confined environment.
Like, I just wanted to add, I don't know if you saw the trend I've seen online where it's like an artist clicking on Unreal or on Unity and then they get flashed and then it's like this fighter jet console, right? They get so confused. It's like, man, you just said one point that is so correct. You learned, like people of your era learned macro to micro, and we're learning micro to maybe macro, but because we're working so much on the details, like if it was a painting, we're focusing on the eyelashes and someone else takes care of the mouth, but we don't know how they interconnect, right? Like you said. And I feel like we need to kind of take a step back, and listen, this is hilarious, but my way of taking a step back was like, I'm gonna learn C++.
I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but yeah, even C++ is like the Unreal to C being, like a DOS program I was talking about or whatever, Another, so Pico 8, by the way, just in case, the game Celeste, I imagine.
Yes, I know.
So the makers of Celeste made the very first version of Celeste using Pico 8. And that version is still playable. You might have seen it. It's like a little square aspect ratio pixel version of Celeste. It's actually embedded inside Celeste somewhere, I think. It's like inside the game. You can go play the OG one somehow. I don't know how you do it, but I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah.
So Pico 8 is really cool and actually has a very vibrant community that is less sort of commercial and stuff because the people there are just enjoying it. And basically you make Pico 8 games and then you can share them to this community where other people can discover your games and play them. You can play them in the browser, or if you own Pico 8, you can play them inside the application. It's amazing. So it does, not only does it evoke the earlier era of computing in terms of the way it wants you to interact with it and think about it, but also the way you share and participate in the community. It's super cool. And actually quite a few successful indie games started as Pico 8 projects and then turned into commercial releases, which is pretty cool. Celeste being the most famous.
Yeah. Hey, before we continue this conversation, I just want to put a brief word on how to support this podcast. This show is for free and it should remain like that. If you ever have found it useful and you want to support its production, you have 3 direct options. The first one is YouTube memberships. When you become a member, you get access to 3 episodes in advance, plus some member badges. Just a way to give back. This, in my opinion, is like the best package for something that doesn't require too much maintenance from me. Second option is a direct donation, if you like, a one-time or monthly on my PayPal account. And the third option, which is my favorite, is purchasing one of the courses that I recommend to you. Now, no one has really time to go through all the courses, but thankfully, I have. So I completed a whole list of the best resources out there for you. And when you decide to purchase a course and learn more and advance in your generalist journey, I'll get a share from your purchase. This is my favorite way of supporting this podcast because it will guarantee that you will learn something new, which is exactly the sentiment I try to share on this podcast. Learn, learn, learn. However, it's all up to you, and this remains for free. Now back to the conversation. I've seen this app on Blue Sky called Pico CAD. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah, so that was made with Pico 8.
Yeah, okay, now I get it. Now I get it.
Yeah, that's why it's called that. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to have the creator on the podcast one day. But
that thing they just made Pico CAD 2, and it seems to be doing really well, and it's super cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like it translates 3D exactly into perfect pixels, which is just like amazing work. All right, so I think we were talking about your journey. We talked about like the very early days, calculators,
right.
C,
entry
DOS.
to coding and stuff.
Yeah. Where does it go from there that you start dabbling with physics and stuff like that are a bit more complex, right?
Yeah, so when was this? I guess this was in high school. Actually, I can't remember exactly when, but at some point, the basic version that I remember is I was super into computers and stuff in high school. And then towards the end of high school, I got a little bit busier with other activities like sports and like just being a bit more social. and then college was like my least at the computer time. Like I was way more I ended up studying film production.
Interesting.
I didn't end up it never occurred to me that I could learn video games and
I see.
or go to school for that.
Yeah.
But I've always liked creative things and technical things, and so film was appealed to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I was studying in college, and I didn't really do a whole lot of game development during college. And then I ended up studying abroad to Japan, and I had an amazing experience, and I loved it so much that after I graduated, I moved back to Japan.
Wow.
And so I lived in Japan for 4 years after college, right after college.
Wow.
And I taught English, which is very common for, a native English speaker.
You could always have a job.
Yeah. I taught English, and then halfway through, I got a job in television production, and I was like basically a production assistant is like what the job would be called here. They called it assistant director, but that sounds way too fancy. It was more like a PA.
Yeah.
So I taught English, and then I worked in Japanese TV to split the 4 years I was in Japan. Anyway, when I was teaching English, I had a lot of free time because the job was not particularly demanding. Like it was pretty easy. You show up and do what you naturally were capable of doing, being born in an English-speaking country.
Yeah.
And then I got back into making games, and the entry point this second time was this software called Dark Basic, which is not really around anymore.
Cool.
But what it was a company had made a simple 3D engine. This was pre-Unity, a simple 3D engine where the coding you did to make your games, you used BASIC, like the coding language BASIC, which is very unintimidating and kind of friendly and simple,
It used to be
so they had commands like,
go ahead, sorry.
like load model or whatever, or like, okay, set camera XYZ or whatever, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be kind of like Scratch, except instead of the block coding, it was text, but it was similarly simplified.
Yep.
And so that was like my entry back into it, but this time making 3D games.
Okay.
And right around that time, rigid body physics engines started to become a thing.
What time is that? Is it 2008?
So this is probably like 99 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
so PS2 era, PS1, PS2 kind of like yeah.
And so like in commercial games, like Half-Life 2 came out and had really impressive physics, that really was integral to the gameplay and was more based on realism and stuff like that. And like Havoc physics was like a name you would hear of being in commercial games and stuff like that.
Films as
and then there was a couple open source ones. There was one called ODE, Open Dynamics Engine.
Yeah.
And then there was one called Tokamak at the time. And I stumbled on this one that wasn't open source, but was free to use, which was called Newton Game Dynamics, which was just one person was making it.
So cool.
And it was amazing.
Yeah.
And I found their demos and everything. I was, this is so cool. Like, wow. So I wanted to use it, but I was using this thing called Dark Basic. Now, Dark Basic had a thing where you could compile C or C++ into like modules that you could integrate into it.
Ooh, cool. All right.
So my first kind of weird project that I did,
Mm-hmm.
it was like vaguely sort of contributing back to the community
Yeah.
rather than just making my own games,
Yeah.
was I made a module that took this C API, physics SDK Newton, and I made a thing for it to plug it into Dark Basic so that you could use it in your Dark Basic games.
Wow.
And I used it myself for several demos and stuff like that. And I was posting it and sharing it on forums and stuff so other people could use it and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was kind of my re-entry into, I forgot how fun it is to make games. Oh, now you can use things like physics engines and stuff and make these games that are like really tactile, boxes will fall and bounce and you can stack them up and knock them over. And like that really connected with me growing up. I mentioned I have an older brother and sister. My older sister is super creative and like a performer. She liked to sing and dance and perform on stage and stuff. And my brother is like basically a mechanical engineer, like building things.
And you're both.
I'm like literally a hybrid of those two.
So good.
And so
good.
I grew up playing a lot of Legos and Technic Legos and making motors and gearboxes and like weird design challenges with my older brother. And so then I could essentially do that digitally now, where I could use a physics engine and make contraptions and objects and things and just conjure them from the keyboard,
So cool.
So that really got me back into it. And that there's a straight line from that to me making freeware games, me getting excited about game making, me getting my first job at Disney, and all the way through now to now.
Also very communal, like your return was also very communal, and now landing also again into like open source and Godot. We see like the okay, let's talk about open source. Obviously, you're someone who appreciates sharing knowledge.
Absolutely,
what got you into Godot?
Yeah, so I was working at Disney. We were making mobile games, and Unity was a big part. I used Unity for a very long time.
Yeah.
Big chunk of it was at Disney.
Yeah.
Right before Unity was like super viable, we were using C++. So, for example, Where's My Water was our own weird little custom engine written in C++.
I would imagine so, because like it needs to be performative.
Like the water and stuff. Yeah. But really, at the time, Unity wasn't really an option. It became an option rapidly. Like by the time Where's My Water came out and we were working on sequels and stuff, in fact, actually the prototype for Where's My Water was created with Unity. But then, we thought, we're doing like, this water physics stuff. Like we probably need to write it in a native code as opposed to C# or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And so anyway, but then we switched to Unity. I used Unity for a very long time and was really familiar with it and loved it. And then when I went indie, I was using Unity. So I have 4 games, on Steam. The first 2 chronologically are my gymnastics simulation game, Pro Gymnast, and my Jelly Car, my modern Jelly Car game, which we didn't really talk about Jelly Car, but I made the first Jelly Car way back when I worked at Disney. I released it as a freeware game and it was popular. And then I kind of handed it to the company Disney and it became a Disney product. We made Jelly Car 2, Jelly Car 3, and then Where's My Water? So Jelly Car is... Besides Where's My Water, Jelly Car is the other kind of most likely you've heard of it or seen it thing that I've made, especially from the early era. And then anyway, once I went indie, I got a chance to make a new Jelly Car game. So
was indie a decision like you took, or
that's kind of the quick version of that. Then we can get back to open source. Is that so you can kind of tell, like I had a natural interest and was tinkering and had this community starting point for making games.
Yeah.
So I always enjoyed making games and posting them on the internet as freeware and stuff like that. And all that interest and communal spirit got me my, first job, because I was like, I could demonstrate, I could get into games because I was like, look, I've made some and like I know what games are about and I know how to make them and I'm passionate about them, etc. But then I joined, a big company and I couldn't really quite have that same output anymore, because it was a little bit like even so, the very first Jelly Car, I made it while I worked at Disney, and I just put it online as a free game because like that's what I did. I made games and I put them up as free games, and I didn't think it would be a conflict of interest or anything like that. But of course, it had to be free, right? If I was going to sell it or something, that would be not inappropriate, right?
Yeah.
But so anyway, my sort of output as a individual creator went down quite a bit as I was working, in games as my day job, but at a big company.
Yeah.
But inside Disney, I was constantly coming up with ideas and prototyping things, but they were all kind of small, weird little ideas. They weren't like big company commercial product ideas.
Yeah.
And so, although things like Where's My Water lined up, where my sensibilities and what I could kind of bring in the market, there was an alignment briefly.
Yeah.
That did not stay the case, right? Like, and so the longer time went on, free to play became more of a thing, and mobile in particular was really, really focused on,
microtransactions.
Yeah, you had the formula for success was you needed a game in a genre that had mass appeal because you had to make your game free, and you needed lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people to play it because only 1% of them would pay. But then you had to design your game in such a way that 1% would make up for everyone, and you'd make a lot of revenue. And those just the constraints of that required games that were not naturally what I was like coming up with on my own,
Yeah.
And so I really, like, in retrospect, if I had been a little bit more comfortable with risk, I would have been the kind of person that would have quit Disney right at the heyday of mobile, like right at the Where's My Water time frame, and just made your own
thing. Mobile. Yeah, absolutely.
But I really liked my job at Disney, and I already had kids by this point, and like it was a nice stable job, and I was like, I don't see why I should be leaving. This is fine, Then eventually it became clear that Disney was going to recede from making their own games to more just like licensing out their IP to external partners.
Gotcha.
Because Disney's gone through several waves of, all we do is license our games to people. Oh, the games aren't good enough. Let's make our own. It's a big business. And then they build up a whole internal team to make them. And then they go, wow, that's hard and expensive. And then they go back to, let's just license.
Outsourcing.
And I was at Disney for one big wave of 10 years-ish of we're making games internally. And when I left Disney, it was because the writing was on the wall that they were gonna be closing down all internal development. And that's obviously where I wanted to be.
Yep.
So I left, and I briefly kind of followed my boss over to Universal and did kind of a similar job at Universal to what I had at Disney. But that was also short-lived, and kind of weirdly, I'm thankful that we all got laid off. And so, I had a long string of a nice stable job that, could support me, and my family. And then I got laid off. And so they had a little window of time with a little bit of a certain number of months of like salary type situation. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to try going indie, which I've been dreaming about and thinking about for quite some time, but never quite willing to choose to do on my own. I was like, okay, this is the sign, like it's time to try it. And so I tried it, and I'm still trying it. So we're hanging in there. That's the basic. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about open source. We went on a segue a little bit.
Yeah. So I was talking about Unity. I was using Unity a whole bunch. I really liked it. I used it at Disney a whole bunch. And so when I went indie, I was still using Unity. But my sort of, I had a growing list of dissatisfaction with Unity. It wasn't necessarily related to it being closed source, although now I realize that wasn't an element, or now that there are options that are open source, they're so incredibly attractive due to their nature of being open source.
Yeah.
So for me, Unity was just getting slower and slower to work with. Like, you change some code. Unity used to be so fast and so quick and so flexible that you could almost make any idea you came up with and just kind of like, you felt like you were just throwing a couple pieces in and compiling together this cool concoction, and you got something working really fast, and it was really, 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 I loved it.
It was a
Unity
great
5
product, basically.
was incredible.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so popular right now, right? Because it was so great when it was Unity 5.
Yeah.
And but yeah, over time,
bloated
through just, I think, the natural process of it becoming so popular and trying to serve so many different customers and becoming this huge company and all this stuff, it just started to become more like I type my code and switch back to Unity and see a progress bar for like 20 seconds before I could hit play. And it's like, what happened? So I was getting frustrated with that. Meanwhile, I started streaming, and I was really enjoying streaming game development, kind of getting some of that community feel back. That now that you mention it, I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but actually maybe that's one of the reasons I like streaming so much.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was streaming my games, and I was starting to discover other people on Twitch who are also making games.
Yeah.
And that showed me examples of people using Unreal, because I was not very familiar with Unreal, but I'd watch people use Unreal and be like, oh, that's how it works. Oh, that's interesting. You know, so now I know more about Unreal, even though I don't use it myself, from watching other streamers use it.
Yeah.
And similarly, I encountered some streamers who were using Godot. And so I was able to kind of keep tabs on it without actually making a project in it myself for like a year or so, where I was watching people that were using it. And I was like, this looks pretty great, you know? And then
the thing happened.
I had my idea for my game that ended up being Replicube, which was a coding game. And I had seen that Godot's UI was really great, and that the Godot editor was a Godot application itself, and there was a code editor built into Godot that was really nice.
True, yeah.
And I thought to myself, like, oh wow, for Replicube, I need a high quality code editor with like syntax highlighting and all the stuff that helps the code easy to format and look at code. So that was my entry point. I was like, I'm going to try making a version of this game I had in my mind, which turned out to be Replicube, in Godot. And so that was my reason to start using it. And I started dabbling around with that, and I was having fun with it. And then that didn't end up being the first Godot game I made, because, but I kind of got interested in it, got comfortable with it. And then a game jam came up that I wanted to participate in, which was Ludum Dare, or Ludum Dare, however you're supposed to say it. And I made the early version of Parking Garage Rally Circuit. And I made that in Godot. I was like, this would be great. I want to mess around with Godot some more. Let me just try making this little game jam game. And that turned out good, and I really liked it. And I decided to make that a commercial project. So then I made it with Godot, and then I followed up with Replicube right after. I've my soundbite is that Godot right now is Unity 5. Like, it is so great to use. Like, I mean, every step of the way it's a little bit unfair, right, to contrast them, because Unity is in a very different place than Godot is. Right, Godot is up and coming and new, and still not bearing the burden of supporting many years worth of features and all, like, blah blah, right? But if you just like naively compare them, it's like, let's start with getting it right. You go to the Godot website and you download a 130 megabyte zip file. You unzip it.
That's it.
And you double click it.
That's
like, you don't even install it, and then it boots up and you're making a video game, and it's like, what? And then, you type code. In my case, I use GDScript rather than C#. Because GDScript is so clearly designed and intended for Godot, and they work so well together. And the experience of just, you're in one app, you flip over to the code tab, you change some code, you flip back. There's no progress bar, there's no thinking, there's no recompiling, there's no reloading. It's just ready to go. And now I've even realized how much you can use hot reloading. So you can have the game running and just flip back to the code tab, change some code, flip back, and it updates.
Awesome.
With some caveats, right? Of course, it can't survive really dramatic changes to the code, but for a lot of use cases, it's just so quick and responsive to use. And then the other big thing is that Godot currently has one of each system that you would need to make a game, right? Input, one system. Technically physics right now, they have two systems, because they have their old physics and they have Jolt now. But Jolt is so clearly now the default that it's not really a situation where you're like, well, which one should I use? It's like, no, just use Jolt. Anyway, basically one physics system, one audio system, one UI system, one animation system, one localization system, but they're all good. They're all well made. They work. They're reliable. And so there's not a lot of time spent making sort of all these decisions. Like in Unity, you need to decide, like, well, which render pipeline should I use?
True.
Which input system should I use? Which UI system should I use?
Which VFX system should I use as well?
And all that kind of weight is just not there. It's just like
It's
really
fast, it's compact.
And I think a lot of people are quick to lob a concern at Godot, like, well, I don't think you can make AAA quality, high performance, open world 3D games or something like that.
Who's that?
And I mean, I guess like that complaint just doesn't even register with me. It's like, well, I'm not making those, so I don't
That's the
care if
thing,
that's
right?
true or
Like
not.
AAA gets pulled as the superior, right? Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
will never be. And it's like,
If the specific thing you want to make is extremely high-end 3D graphics, it's probably the case that Godot is not as robust as maybe Unreal, certainly, and maybe even Unity.
uh-huh.
And that just doesn't. I don't even know if that's true or not, but it doesn't even matter because
Doesn't
like I'm
matter.
not even vaguely attempting
No.
to go in that direction. Like, I mean, the game I'm making right now is the most like, detailed, complex 3D game I've ever made.
Tell us about it a little bit. What's the name? What is it about? Because I've seen the shorts. It's
Yeah.
looking amazing. I really want to ask you a lot of questions about it. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So the new game I'm making in Godot is called 4x4 in a Furniture Store, and that's exactly what you do in the game. You drive a 4-wheel drive vehicle in a furniture store.
So cool.
It does come back. You mentioned physics. Like almost all my games tend to have some kind of physics center point, other than Replicube, which is like my two things I like is like physicsy stuff and like coding and graphics and stuff. And so you can see that in my games. Like I'm either making like a sort of tactile, physical kind of toy-like game, or like basically playing with Legos but digitally.
Yeah.
Or I'm making a game about the aspects of game making that I really like coding and graphics and stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So this is essentially it's a somewhat realistic 4-wheel drive off-roading simulation. You have like a compact 4x4, kind of like a Suzuki or like a that kind of a vehicle.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just rather than set it in the wilderness with mud and trees and dirt and stuff.
Yep.
I just thought it would be really fun to try and drive a car like that on objects intended for humans, like sofas and desks and tables and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The original idea actually was going to be an office building.
Yeah.
Like you were going to be driving around inside an office in your 4x4. But after I made an office, I realized that office layouts are really, really repetitive. It's just a bunch of desks in a kind of grid, and like I was going to have to make a office that was really outlandish in terms of the layout to make it fun to have lots of challenges and variety and stuff. And then I realized a furniture store puts furniture in arbitrary configurations for the purpose of like showing it to you like a showroom or whatever. And so like, and the ceilings are much higher and like it's more spacious and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's a much better setting. So now the game takes place in a furniture store to kind of explain the silly setups you get to drive around. I think also because I tend to approach like, okay, why do I like this game I'm making, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily because I want to make something where you've been driving up a crazy path floating in the sky for 30 minutes. And if make one false move, you're going to fall and be like, oh, curse you, game designer, or whatever. And yes, on the flip side, when you get up to the top, you'll feel incredibly accomplished.
Yep.
But like, that is not the entry point for me. The entry point for me is much more toy-like. I'm like, it's just fun to try and drive a car over stuff. Like, that's just fun.
That's true.
And so for me, it's more like I want you to have that toy-like feeling when you're playing with the game. And so I would rather set up lots of fun little examples of how fun it is to drive a car over stuff rather than chain them together in some kind of epic, difficulty experience. So that's just more my bias or nature.
Right? Yeah.
And I do struggle with it a little bit because people look at my games and assume they're rage games. And I don't really know how to grapple with that immediate interpretation that is very common.
I feel like it's the lack of such games with different categories.
Yeah, possibly. Like the only kind of obvious reference point. And I do tend to make games, like I said, that, my other complaint with rage games, and this is not true of Getting Over It. Getting Over It is actually incredible game. And it is very controllable. You can be incredibly skilled at the controls. Whereas there are other games that are trying to be like Getting Over It, where they aren't as artfully or thoughtfully constructed. And so actually part of the point is that the controls are like awkward or not that good. And then people have started to equate those things where they think the point is that the controls are kind of crappy. And I really, really reject that because it really bothers me. Like that means you're sort of disengaging with the game in terms of like, this is something that's actually well made and you can actually be good at. And instead backing up from it and going, this is one of these crappy throwaway games where the whole point is that it's shitty and like, you're just going to suck at it. And like, they know that, and they made a crappy game on purpose just to make me frustrated. Like, I get it. Ha ha ha. You know? And like that kind of dismissive lens really does not sit well with me. Like, I don't want to be in that category.
Because you're coming from like
I super care about what I make.
Playing actual Lego, but digitally, and that is so different, right? Because like you're putting so much effort into making it juicy, into making it fun and joyful, while maybe others are not. And when you get put in the same box, it could feel a little bit, you know, like, no, that's not what I was going for, damn it.
Yeah. So I struggle with that a little bit. I don't really know what to do other than just kind of keep doing what I'm doing, and maybe people will start to figure it out. But
I honestly think the good news of this is you're early, right, in your philosophy, I feel, in games, and that is something rare to find, especially these days, to have a rare idea that it's not yet experimented and be early into something. And I feel like you got that, and you see it immediately with like Where's My Water. Like, I remember being, what was I, 14 when I first had it, and I was like, wow. I couldn't buy anything because like I was in Syria, and you know there's no credit cards in Syria to buy the game, but I was so fascinated by the concept. Like, wow, the water is going down, this is awesome. I loved it. So I feel like you've done that, you will continue on doing that, especially with the rally game. Like, just looking at that rally game, I was like, this is so juicy. I love it. I want to play with this game. But your current game, like all the clips that I've seen of it, the physics seemed so realistic. Like, I have two questions for you, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take you to pick up Godot GD script, and how long did it take you to get that good at physics in Godot?
Well, so the answer to both of those is basically zero time. Like, I mean, Godot and GD script, I do have the luxury of like, I've been interested in making games for a long duration of time, which means I've outlasted any one, you know, individual tool. So it's not like, for example, I started games when Unity existed, so I learned C# and then that's it. And so I feel this like fear of maybe switching to a different programming language or something, because that seems like it'll be difficult. I do not have that view at all. You know, I did BASIC and then assembly and then C and then C++ and then C# and then, you know, and I've done a little bit of Python and you know, a million languages. So for me, I'm very comfortable with the opinion that programming languages are 99% the same. Like, and the 1% difference is so minor that it's like, it is no burden to switch to a different programming language. It's fine. It's easy. It's not a big deal. So I switched to GDScript and was like, oh, here's a couple things that are missing. Okay. And then I'm off to the races, and I love it. It works great. It's not a big deal at all. So that didn't really take much time, partly because I wasn't intimidated by it, and also partly because it's actually not that hard to switch. And then kind of similar with physics, like I do think that I tend to be quicker at getting results with physics-based stuff than maybe the average person. But I think that mostly just comes from experience, time invested in it. I've worked with physics engines, like I said, since like very late 90s, maybe early 2000s. That's a long time. And a lot of games I've made have used physics, so I just have a lot of experience with it. And the other little bit, I think, is that the modern physics engines, of which everyone uses, including Jolt, the new one, which, by the way, is awesome.
I've seen the footage.
I'm actually kind of amazed the game works as well as it does. And it's not really me. It's me leaning on Jolt and Jolt delivering.
Wow.
Because this is the type of game where if there was a fundamental flaw in Jolt to make a game like this, I just couldn't make it. You know, like I'm not capable of writing Jolt. So anyway, the one thing I've definitely learned is that all these modern physics engines came very strongly from a point of view of simulation, right? They are like academic oriented simulation systems.
Yeah.
Their job is to simulate reality.
Yeah.
And if you approach them from that point of view and say, well, how is the thing I'm trying to create physically plausible in the real world?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And if I were to construct it in the real world, how would it be constructed? It'd be made of these pieces that are connected with motors or joints or hinges or whatever. And how would it actually be constructed? How big would it be? How dense would all the pieces be? If you approach it from that angle, you will find success with physics engines because you're doing what they are trying to do, which is actually simulate the real world. What tends to happen is that game developers come from an angle of like, physics engines are magic. What you're supposed to do is just magically solve collisions for me and magically solve, stuff for me. And I can throw any numbers I want at you because I'm making a video game and you should just work. And so they'll put some stuff together and it will like jitter and explode or whatever. And then they form the conclusion that the physics engine is crappy. When in reality, what they asked it to do was simulate something that is literally unsimulatable. You know what I mean? Like it would be like saying, like, for example, if you just say, make me a cube, right, in any game engine.
Yeah.
The cube's going to be 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, right? That's actually, in physical units, a very large cube, right? Like it's a huge box that came from Amazon with like a vacuum in it or something, right?
Yeah.
And then what is the default mass? 1 kilogram.
Oh my God, okay. So it will fly all the time.
That is a styrofoam box that's 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. Like, and then if you held that thing up and dropped it, like it would go kink, 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 you know what I mean? And the thing is that physics engines do have to make some units are really important with physics engines.
Yeah.
Like size, basically, if you think about it in terms of meters, and then mass, you think of it in terms of kilograms, and you actually make those values plausible, suddenly the physics engine
just looks much better. Yeah.
Yeah, and because you're asking it to simulate something that is actually plausible. And then that really, really becomes important once you introduce joints into the equation, because joints are really difficult, right? Like you're saying, hey, I have this object and it's connected to this other object in a way that's like rigid, like they have to, have a perfect hinge or whatever, right? What happens is, the physics engine is like simulating the two objects individually. So they fall, and let's say they want it to bounce away from each other. And then it goes, oh crap, no, there's a hinge here. And it has to like resolve it and be like, well, okay, so if they were connected, like where would they be? And then kind of re-simulate a couple times and try and like resolve the fact that some forces are trying to pull the objects apart, but the hinge is trying to hold the objects together.
Okay.
And so what ends up happening is, like, if this scenario is plausible, like this object, the weight of it and the size of it and the shape of it, and therefore the what do they call it? The moment of inertia, like how resistant it is to spinning in different directions and stuff like that. Which is a number you don't normally type in yourself, but it's a number that's produced as a result of the size, shape, and mass settings, right?
Yeah.
So if that's reasonable number, and this is a reasonable number, it'll resolve to a solution pretty quickly. But a lot of times what people will make is it'll be like the equivalent of saying, I have the Empire State Building over here, and then I have a Boeing jet-sized object attached to it, but the mass of it is a ballpoint pen. And I've said they're connected together with a hinge, and I just dropped them 3,000 feet, and they slammed into the ground, and I expected it to just go boing, 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 and it's like that hinge would explode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the physics engine does the right thing. It fails. It cannot possibly maintain the constraints you're asking it to, because it turns out what you put in is data that makes no sense. So anyway, I've just definitely learned to approach things from a more physical standpoint. Like, well, what are the approximate sizes? What are the approximate masses? And like what things, things that sort of loosely make sense. And then if you construct things that way, you tend not to fight the physics engine. You tend to get the most out of it.
It's interesting that you go more like direction reality than you go direction virtuality, and then you're working with the physics engine instead of just like brute forcing it, which is just
and then you can you can convince it to do stuff that's a little bit sillier, a little bit outside of the realm of true reality, but it's better to start from a plausible setup that would actually work in reality, and then and then push it a little bit in the direction you want to go, rather than
like
the other way
that,
around, which
yeah.
is expect it to just magically solve your crazy setup.
I
that
wonder
you
if
didn't
like
think
when you work with Jolt, I don't know how it is. I've never worked with Jolt. Like, does it have a scene, for example, like in Godot, where you could have like plausible scenarios that you could scale later that are like nailed down?
That's a good question. I mean, most physics engines do have a suite of demo scenes, where they show off all the features.
Yeah.
So usually, if you can find those, you could at least go look at them and look at the values they're using for things like size, and mass, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can show you a little bit if you want to see
Sure.
the
Yeah,
car.
let's go.
So this is what it looks like in Godot, which doesn't look. This is a mixture of the visuals and the the physical elements.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard to look at this and go, "Oh, I see what you did there. Nice job,"
Yeah.
But you can see, like, over here, all of these are rigid bodies. So there's a lot of rigid bodies, and they're all connected together with joints. There's lots of different types of joints you can use. I almost entirely use this thing called generic 6-DOF joint 3D, which is the most intimidating sounding thing in the world. Because there are other ones like Hinge, and you're like, "Oh, I get what that one does," But this one is basically a multi-purpose joint where you could make a hinge out of it, you could make a sliding joint out of it, you could make a combination of things out of it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've used for everything. But the best way to show you actually is in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up making a little debug view. So there is a thing in Godot where you can click a checkbox and say, "Show me the colliders when I run the game."
Mm-hmm.
Maybe actually it'd be kind of fun to look at that real quick.
So
if you go debug visible collision shapes, and then you run the game, what it'll do is it will draw like little wireframe versions of the colliders, so that you can visualize them as you're driving around, which is pretty useful. So you'll see here, like, let me make this bigger. There we go. So now you can kind of see, like, okay, there's like some wireframes and stuff. And like if you go over and look at these stairs, you can see like, oh, it's actually really detailed. Like it's actually just like the collision and the visuals are the same thing.
Yeah.
But this is a little hard to see. Like if you look at the car, I don't know if you can tell what's going on with the car in terms of the physics this way, right? It's a little tricky because it's just a wireframe overlay.
Yeah, exactly.
So I knew I was going to run into a lot of times where I needed to debug or kind of make sure the colliders align how I think they do and stuff like that. So I spent a little bit of time and made my own little thing. Made my own little thing in Godot where I can hit a key and it will hide all the visuals and make meshes out of the physics, so you can just see the physics.
Okay.
So it's going to take it a second here, but I'll show you. So if I do this, okay, it's frozen right now because it's thinking. It's going through the whole world right now, and it's taking every collider and turning it into a mesh and then hiding the visual mesh so that we can just look at what the physics engine sees.
Wow.
So this is what the physics engine sees. Like you can see, for example, like the character over here is just a little capsule. That's pretty common, right?
Yeah.
Where they just like slide around as a capsule. But like the car is actually quite a few pieces.
Wow.
So the main red part you're seeing is the main collider for the body of the car.
Yeah.
And then you can see that there are some little characters inside. Like when I shake the car, you can see them like wiggle around.
Oh my god.
So there's always technically two people in the car at all times, even though sometimes it doesn't show the passenger because the passenger's not in the car right now. But physics wise, there's these two bodies, like body and a head. And I use the body and the head reacting to the physics to pose the visual characters.
So good.
And then you can see like, oh, this piece on the back. You can actually open the like the thing on the back. Although I don't have any use for that in the game right now, but it is a separate piece. Same thing with the hood.
Yeah.
And then the crazy thing is the green thing you see here. This is the axles, the rigid axles.
Yep.
So it is constructed somewhat like an actual car, right? Like
exactly.
There's the main car, and then there's these rigid axles because this is a 4-wheel drive car. It would have a rigid axle. Those are connected with springs that simulate the suspension of the car, which would be this stuff,
Yeah.
And then the tires are connected to those axle pieces with either just the ability to spin, like the back tires, or the ability to spin and steer, like the front tires, so I can steer the tires. And then I really wanted a lot of grip on the tires and really to simulate how, like not overly inflated 4-wheel drive tires have a little bit of give, and they can kind of really grip as they roll up over things and stuff like that.
Exactly.
In order to sort of make that, my tires are actually overly complicated. You can see they're made up of multiple pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a main cylinder that's like the main tire, but it's smaller than the actual tire is.
Yeah.
And then there's a ring of objects around that kind of represent the treads of the tire, and also loosely simulate the give of the air pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, each one of these 12 pieces is on a spring. It can only move in and out towards the center of the tire. But being distributed around there, they almost work like a tank tread or something, where you can see them. So if I go somewhere where I can actually drive on something, like if we just go over here real quick.
So interesting.
And you like look at the tire, you can see how that one piece is kind of grabbing on, and it's really willing to climb up and over onto the objects. You get a lot of nice, really satisfying traction because of this setup. And so, like the actual game, there's not very many scripts to make this.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's mostly this physics setup that I put together thoughtfully, right?
Wow.
And then, like when you hit the gas, I'm just telling the rear axle to spin the tires, and when you turn the steering wheel, I'm just telling that joint to turn the angle. Like there's not a whole complex system where I'm like, oh my God, we're a 4x4. Let's calculate all this stuff. It's more just like, let's have some nice inputs into a physics setup.
Again, to the toy method. Right?
Yeah, it's very toy-like.
Very
yes,
toy-like, and
like this is my toy. So now, what game can I make with it?
That's interesting that you use Game Engine to create toys, because then you have the ultimate freedom, right?
Yeah, it's a look at this digital sandbox we get to play around in.
Absolutely, I love the way you look at it. It's very motivating.
Fun objects that we can, and so all these missions are essentially just exactly what you said. Every mission in the game is just an excuse to try to have you play with a toy in a different way.
I don't know what this is called in English, but some cars have this thing in the back where you could put like we call it in German Anhänger. It's like
to attach, like to tow something.
To tow something. Yeah. Have you thought about that? That could be fun.
Yeah. I do have it actually. I can show you over here.
Oh, that would be cool. Like to upgrade your car, the more you do missions, and then I mean, the level looks amazing. I love the drifting mechanics.
Like the warehouse section of the thing, and you can see over here. There's one of those like portable staircases you might find in like a store or something, and it has that attach point on it.
Hell yeah.
So I go like this and then attach like this. Now I'm connected, and I can drive it around, and
that's so smart.
So I can take these stairs somewhere, and then I could let go, and then I could drive up the stairs and get onto the shelves and stuff like that.
Question: do you find it easier to design a game once you've figured like the toy-like element first?
Well, I don't know if it's easier or not, but that is 100% the approach I take.
I love it.
Basically, every game for me is I find the what I call the toy, which is kind of the core interaction that's inherently fun. And then I just go, how do I surround this with a little bit of structure so that everyone else can realize that this toy is fun to play with? And most times, the toy, if you just kind of play with it, it will start to pull you in the direction it wants to go. It's like, this is what I want.
It reminds me when I was a child and I would have like a toy like that, and I would start imagining scenarios. And your approach is so in tone with your inner child, I feel. It's so amazing.
So the good part about that is that the games always tend to be very playful and very like you can get a lot out of them. There's a lot of fun to be found.
Yeah.
The potential downside as a person making commercial games that I'm trying to make money from is that the toy might, because you start with a toy, it's less clear what the game's going to be at the end. Like what's the genre, what's the structure, what's the progression. And so it's less common that I land in a well-known game type, like whereas you could imagine starting the other way around, saying, I really like, roguelike deck builders.
Exactly.
So let me try and think of a unique, within that constraint, let me try and think of a unique take that I could have on this particular genre, but I already know all these things I need. That's more of a top-down sequencing.
Yeah.
And I tend to go more bottoms up, which means I don't quite, the toy is telling me what game to make, and that game may not be either in a popular genre,
Yeah.
or it might be harder for me to communicate what the game is because I don't have the shorthand of like, well, it's
Yeah.
obviously this type of game or that type of game.
It's
you
so
know, like I
interesting
said,
how
you said earlier,
innovative, like your approach is so innovative. It's the approach that eventually gets to be categorized. You know what I mean? Like it's so fluid.
I guess.
It's so spectrum. You know, in that it's so fluid. It's not. You're saying the game will tell you, and I feel I myself as a visionary sometimes I feel annoyed by the idea of like. No, you have to study the market and analytics and
Right.
statistics, and then they tell you they study a market that was in 2022 that was not
Yeah.
oversaturated by card deck builders, you know.
Yeah.
And now when you make a card deck builder, it's of course it's gonna fail because it's oversaturated the whole market.
Yeah. And it's very funny to me because
Yeah.
like, so I mean, I'm happy with that because this is just the way that makes the most sense to me. And I enjoy the process very much.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing for me is that my like big dark secret, you know, is that like I like making games more than playing them.
I love that.
So like if you ask me, hey, what are the games you've been playing this year? It's a very short list, you know, like I don't play a lot of games.
Yeah.
Partially because, well, I'm busy, I have kids and stuff, you know, and like
you're making
so
games.
I find that if I have some free time and I have energy, I want to spend it making a game.
Yeah.
And if I have some free time and I don't have energy, a game is too much effort and I'd rather just like watch a movie or something. And so like the weird perfect time of like I have some time and energy but not enough to make a game but more than watching a movie, so I'll play a game is like very rare. So like I just really enjoy making games and I enjoy learning, and making games is filled with learning, and so I just really enjoy it. So
you also
for
stream
me,
your process, right? Like this is all kind of documented. If you're curious how the game was or got created, you could check it probably on your YouTube, correct?
Yeah, I stream on Twitch.
Twitch, yeah.
So 3 times a week right now for about 3 hours each time.
Yeah.
I just work on my game live on Twitch.
Yeah.
And I try to, you know, make that as interesting as it can be. Sometimes it's boring because I'm doing boring tasks. Sometimes it's really fun because I'm doing fun tasks. But it's always interesting, I think. And the audience that comes by is super fun. And I really enjoy the communal aspect of it, of kind of getting suggestions or questions. And a lot of times, you know, the game benefits from it because I'll get a suggestion and then I'll be like, I don't know about that. And then I'll think on it and like come back the next week and I'm like, that was actually really interesting. And that gave me this idea, you know, and it'll evolve.
So cool.
Which is really cool. And the community of other people that also stream is really, really great. And everyone, I think you might think, first of all, Twitch, why would I even want to, some people say, why would I even want to watch someone play a game, right? And I can understand that point of view if you're like, if you don't quite get it. That just means you haven't actually tried watching a streamer. Because if you have, you realize that it's actually really interesting and fun. And same thing for game development. You might be like, that sounds like the most boring thing to go watch.
Camaraderie.
But it's actually really fun. And the community of streamers that do it are all so cool. Like they're all very friendly. They're all very welcoming. They love talking about not just their game, but games in general, and answering questions or you know, like you know, just sort of interacting with people who are interested in the same thing they are, you know. And so
that all comes with indie development. Like if you have taken a company where you're like really, you know, the approach of a company, which is like, no, we're doing this thing with an NDA and no one is allowed to look or touch or you know, whatever, think even of new ideas. What you're doing is like you're opening it up. You're like, oh, come on, join us. This is how it's done. This is how the bread is made, right? Like, put your ideas here.
So I do stream approximately 9 total hours per week, and then I generally pull clips from my streams of interesting things that happened or fun little moments, and that tends to be what I'm posting on my other social media. Like, so I post on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube short little clips that are almost always from my stream. Every now and then I'll make a clip, like, you know, just for those platforms, but that's pretty rare. So that's how I kind of share. You know, I there's no like, I don't worry at all about literally showing everything. I just showed you exactly how I made my car in my game, right? Which you could say is like, well, isn't that your top secret element, like that makes your game special? It's like, whatever. Like it's, I have a hard time worrying about that. I think I'd rather enjoy talking about it and sharing it with people.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
I feel
but
like,
yeah, so you can follow along really actively on the streams or sort of a bit more passively on the other platforms and just see kind of the highlights. But I'm always happy to show what I'm making. And I tried making some higher effort YouTube videos in the past, but I didn't get a lot of return on those. Like I made devlogs, for example, for Jellycar Worlds. I made like 12 devlogs, but like, and they were fun to make. And I enjoyed trying to think what I want, how to put together a thought, into a video. But they just didn't really.
It's a different approach. It's like
it's way more me off in the corner making something and then dropping it, and then there's a little bit of interaction in the comment section and stuff, but like not very much. Whereas like streaming is so much more. I don't have to prepare for it, and it's more communal and interactive, and so like for me, it's way more rewarding and fun.
Same.
So I don't really make a lot of like videos, although occasionally I will make a more like a single topic. I'll make a tutorial video. I've made like 3 so far. I made one about the soft body physics in Jellycar. Like I made a pretty good video that's like, if you're curious about Jellycar and the weird 2D physics and that, here's how it works. This is a good starting point if you're interested. Like I made a nice video about that, and that video has been well received, so that's cool. And I have like we haven't talked about it today, but I have like another like mini studio with my friend where the two of us also make games. That's called Toyful Games. Toyful, because we have the same philosophy: start with the toy and then fill it out.
That's awesome.
And we've made this game called Very Very Valet, which is kind of the simple version is it's overcooked, but instead of cooking, you're parking cars for customers because you're a valet.
So good.
So it's like a co-op game where customers come in and you take their car from them and then go park it. They go in the building, they come out the building, and you have to give them their car back.
I love that.
And you're running around like, oh, you go get that car, I'll get this car kind of thing. Anyway, for that game, I made 2 videos, one about our character controller and one about the car physics. And those have also been pretty good, like sort of tutorial adjacent content that's done pretty well on YouTube. So every now and then I'll make a high effort kind of explainer kind of video, but
I think what could be a really good video is to explain like what we talked about today, which is like the micro to macro.
Don't fight the physics engine.
No.
That one.
Like that too. I feel like it's such a good point. Like I'm so grateful that we talked today, because I've been battling with myself about the same issue for such a long time. I'm like, I feel like I'm missing out. Maybe I need to go and study computer science, right?
Right.
But when you said it like, with like, you started with this 1-page thing, and now because you started in such a like macro way, you could think about things in micro steps.
Right.
Yeah, a video about that would be amazing.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that. I don't think I watch a lot of like game dev adjacent YouTube content and stuff. And it's true that I don't know if I've necessarily seen someone kind of put that take together in a way that, digestible.
I think you have a very unique perspective, actually, a very healthy perspective to games, especially in this time that we need more of like, let's dump this job shit on the side and let's think about it as a craft that we enjoy. Think about it as a toy that is digital, and then let the game tell you where it wants to go. Because I feel like that's what happened with Mario. That's what happened with like the original games. People in their underwear in the basement making a game. That was the joy of Toyful games.
Yeah, the like the lore is that is very much Nintendo's philosophy, and you can kind of see that. For example,
definitely.
Splatoon is a huge example where it's like they came up with an idea and then it didn't fit any of their existing IPs, so they made a new IP, and that's how you get Splatoon. And you can kind of see like Donkey Kong Bonanza was the Mario team prototyping future platformers, and then they found the toy, which was this destruction toy, and they were like, oh, that's not a Mario toy. That's a Donkey Kong toy. And so like that's how a new Donkey Kong comes out, is because they followed the toy a little bit. Of course, obviously they layer in commercial elements,
And they do it all
thought, of
perfectly,
course,
though.
right?
Like, they do it so good. Like, the dance.
But it is the Cliff Notes version of like how does Nintendo approach, I think, is this, generally speaking, this sort of toy first approach. I should mention though that like this interview might make it sound like I just follow my toys around and like, I somehow that's turning into a sustainable commercial output, and like that's a little bit simplified, right? Like
There's a
I
lot of
do
nuances.
have to think a lot about do I think there's an audience for these games, and before I spend time on them and stuff. And so what I've found for me that is at least seems to be a status quo for me right now is I've combined the fact that my process means I have a interesting looking toy very early in the process, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if I was really interested in making like civilization type games, like big simulation games or something like that, you don't really have a mini version of civilization after a week, right?
Yeah.
You have to build lots of systems and put them all together before you can finally actually play civilization, right?
That's a great
Whereas
point.
most of the games I make, the toy is there from like 24 hours in, like I had this car right away, it hasn't changed that much throughout the development. I've improved it a couple of times, but the four-wheel drive car was there from within, a couple days.
Yeah.
And which means I can post clips of my very, 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 very early ideas. And then those clips serve like multiple purposes for me, right? They are my marketing, right? They're like how I try to get the word out about me and that I exist and I'm making video games. And I don't have time to do capital M marketing, so I have to do lowercase m marketing, which is me just taking clips from my streams because they already exist. So that's all I can do. It's all I have time to do. That's all I have skill set to do. But it does mean that I'm sharing stuff when it's brand new, and that serves the purpose of getting people aware of what I'm doing. But it also means I get to see if there's a response to it or not. And so I'm able to kind of gauge, okay, enough people are interested in this that I think
it's worth
if
investing.
I at least have some interest. It's obviously not a dud, and if I spend a year making a game out of it, I'll probably make my money back as long as the game's not too big and I don't charge too much for it. Blah blah blah. So like
but
that's how I've kind of evolved to take this thing of where I like sharing in the first place, but it also is a bit to my benefit because it's how I get the word out about myself, and also how I make sure what I'm making is at least resonating with people. And so if for example, this game, I had posted, quite a bit about it, I was excited about it, and it was just like crickets out in social media, that would have been a strong signal that maybe I need to pursue a different game, even though I like this one, because this toy people don't care about. So
that's a good point. Also, like, even if you didn't make it, like the whole investment back, you're also building up your social media, which is always in the plus, right? It's never in the minus, and you're just gonna keep going, and you're gonna. That's the beautiful part about like just going with it with like the stream mentality of like sharing and not just holding information. And like I'm benefiting from talking to you today, right? Like I've been struggling with this idea, like I told you, but like it's amazing. We're reaching the end here. It's been great. Thank you so much for accepting my invite. One last thing is I try to extract knowledge as much as possible from my guests. So what are some books, resources you would give to yourself now, 20 years back?
That's a good question. Right now, I feel like mostly because my experience was not really book centric. It was very early internet, and so what I wish I could give everyone is the ability to rewind to the early internet when
that's selfish.
I know, right? But because the community aspect that we've talked about a lot today was a huge part of it for me, because it was both a great source of information, but also a source of
companionship.
And just like a community, finding people that are interested in the same things you are and are passionate and motivated, and that's motivating to be part of that. It makes you want to then communicate and participate and share and all that.
Absolutely.
And so, to the extent that you can find that now, I think that is one of the most valuable things. And actually, yeah, I mentioned, for example, Pico 8 earlier today as like something I would recommend more from a experience as an individual using a tool that's kind of confined and forces you to kind of learn the absolute basics in a confined environment before you go into a place like Unity or Unreal where you're surrounded by this massive machine that's you don't really understand how it works.
Yeah.
But also something like Pico 8 has a community, and they have their own forums and places where they're hanging out, where they are not only recreating these older computers in terms of the experience of using them and learning from them, but also the communal experience of what it was like to be in and amongst people that were passionate about this particular, niche.
Yeah.
And so I would actually really strongly recommend seeking out, whether it be Pico 8. There's another one. Pico 8 is paid, but it is so unbelievably worth the price that you should just take my guidance and just buy it.
Yeah.
Like you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
But there's also a free one called Take 80. Which is really nice and has a good community around it. And there's other things like that. But I would go find something like another example would be like homebrew community. So there's people that really like making Game Boy games.
Oh.
And they have like cool modern tools now to make Game Boy games. It's not as hard as it was back in the day.
Uh-huh.
But that's like an example where once again you're working on a kind of simplified system. It's not as intimidating, there isn't as much to it, so there's not as much to learn to get started.
Yep.
And it's got a community around it that's a little bit off to the side, and it's not necessarily what you'll find if you just go to Twitter and type in gamedev and see people with all their hot takes and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Pico 8, Tick 80, something like the Game Boy homebrew community, or like GBA devs, or like
PS1 devs even, like there's
PS1 homebrew is really cool. Like
so cool.
NES homebrew is really cool, and you're more likely to find the right mixture of elements, I think. And the point is that doesn't need to be your destination, right? If your goal eventually is to make games, that are bigger, or run on PC or whatever, that, of course, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying don't jump to that.
Yeah.
Go get the experience earlier in a
emulate
in a magical little setup where you have a little bit more confined environment, a little bit of a simpler thing.
Yeah.
That means that the things you can make are maybe a little bit limited, but that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
And then when you sort of outgrow it, you're ready.
Yeah.
Whereas jumping into the deep end is
so like a Godot is, you see Godot as like a complex machine.
Yeah, I would put Godot in the complex category. Yes.
Man, you need to make a video about this.
Get started, and you can follow a tutorial. You can go look up like basic Godot and follow a tutorial. That tutorial is gonna. What happens a lot of people have this problem, right, where they follow along a tutorial and then they don't retain any information from it, right?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because maybe the nature of the tutorials is kind of not really trying to teach you, but more trying to be kind of entertaining / whatever, or it's very specific, and so. If you're following along, all you learned how to do was make the cube spin from the tutorial, but nothing else or whatever. And I think another reason why that happens is because it's inside this big complex thing. And so you can't do anything in Godot or Unreal or Unity without blocking your mind off to a bunch of words that you're going to encounter that it's not ready. It's not the right time for you to learn what that word means. So you have to just like do this weird thing where you filter out like 70% of the world to learn the 30% that you're ready for.
Yeah.
And no one's really equipped to do that from day one. Like, how do you know which words are the ones you need to learn right now and which ones are the ones you can defer to later? And if you go to one of these smaller things I'm talking about, that doesn't happen because the whole thing is understandable. All the words are words you should learn. There's no like.
Yeah, I love that. So. Yeah. And then you could scale up from that when the time is right. And
just I like start with a small tool and then outgrow it. Because if you outgrow the tool, you're ready for the next one.
It's like this super complicated hammer. Well, you should have just like grabbed the hammer and nailed something down and just got the concept, because otherwise it would have been too much. Listen, man, it's been great having you on. Any last thing you would like to promote before we go?
No, thanks so much for having me. Like I said, I'm Walaber on all the different platforms, so find me out. If you're interested, if I convince you about streaming, please come by. And even if you don't watch me, just go to Twitch and go to the game development category and try it out. I promise you it's really fun. And it has some of that community that we were just talking about. Awesome. And yeah, I mean, wishlist the silly game I'm making 4x4 in a furniture store.
I'll leave all the links in the description. Let's stay on the call. I'll just say goodbye to the viewers. Hey everyone,
Sure.
thank you a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.